Christopher Bennett's hands shook as he pushed open the front door of his mansion, the keys heavy in his palm, not from their weight, but from the memory of giving them away 3 weeks ago to a homeless woman he'd never met, a decision that defied every rational bone in his body and might have cost him everything. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Before we begin, please click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. The rain had come without warning that October evening, transforming Los Angeles into a blurred watercolor of brake lights and desperation. Christopher Bennett sat rigid in the back of his black Mercedes S-Class, watching the wipers slice furiously across the windshield as his driver, James, navigated toward LAX. The leather briefcase on his lap contained contracts worth $47 million, Singapore expansion plans that had consumed 6 months of his life. Yet all Christopher could think about was the empty house he was leaving behind. "Traffic's murder tonight, Mr. Bennett," James muttered, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "That accident on the 405 has everything backed up." Christopher barely heard him. His blue eyes, red-rimmed from another sleepless night, fixed on nothing. The windshield might as well have been a movie screen playing his failures on loop. Rebecca's laughter. The hospital room. The flatline sound that still woke him at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat. 18 months. 18 months since cancer had stolen his wife, and he still couldn't walk through the sunroom without seeing her there, pruning her ridiculous collection of orchids, flower on her cheek from some experimental bread recipe. The mansion on Mulholland Drive had become a mausoleum, 12,000 square feet of marble floors and cathedral ceilings that echoed with her absence. This Singapore trip was supposed to fix something. Movement instead of paralysis. Business instead of grief. Christopher had buried himself in deals, in meetings, in the relentless machinery of Bennett Holdings since the funeral. His brother Thomas called it avoidance. Christopher called it survival. The Mercedes crawled past a bus shelter, and that's when he saw her. She couldn't have been more than 25, a black woman with her hair plastered to her skull by the downpour, hunched over something in her arms. Even through the rain-streaked window, Christopher could see she was trying to shield whatever she held with her own body, using a flattened cardboard box as an inadequate umbrella. A tattered duffel bag sat in a puddle beside her feet. "James, slow down." "Sir." The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "Stop the car." James eased toward the curb, confusion evident in the set of his shoulders. "Mr. Bennett, your flight leaves in 90 minutes. With this traffic." But Christopher was already opening the door, the rain immediately soaking through his $1,500 Tom Ford suit. He stepped onto the sidewalk, and the woman's head snapped up. Her eyes, dark brown and enormous in her gaunt face, widened with something between fear and exhausted hope. That's when he saw the baby. The infant couldn't have been more than 6 months old, wrapped in what looked like 3 different threadbare blankets, somehow still dry against the mother's chest. Tiny fingers poked out from the bundle, and Christopher's breath caught. The woman pulled her daughter closer, a reflexive movement he recognized. The way someone protects their most precious thing when they've already lost everything else. "Are you okay?" The question was stupid the moment it left his mouth. Obviously, she wasn't okay. She was soaking wet, shivering, homeless with an infant in a rainstorm. "We're fine." Her voice was hoarse, defensive. "We're just waiting for the bus." Christopher looked at the shelter, one side completely exposed, the plastic panel shattered. The bus schedule posted inside was so faded it was illegible. Rain poured through the broken section like a waterfall. "When does it come?" She hesitated. 20 minutes. He could tell she was lying. There probably was no bus coming, not for hours. Maybe not at all. For 18 months, Christopher had been numb. He'd mechanically signed documents, attended board meetings, smiled at appropriate moments while feeling nothing. But standing there in the rain, watching this woman try to preserve her daughter's dignity while the world literally poured down on them, something cracked open in his chest. Rebecca would have stopped. Rebecca would have done something. "What's your name?" he asked. The woman's jaw tightened. "Why?" "I'm Christopher." He wiped rain from his face. "And I'm about to do something either incredibly kind or incredibly stupid." "Mr. Bennett," James had stepped out of the car, holding an umbrella that did nothing against the horizontal rain. "Sir, we really need to go." Christopher ignored him. His hands moved to his pockets almost of their own volition, pulling out his wallet. Inside were his house keys on a simple silver ring, the keys to the mansion, the gate code written on a small tag Rebecca had insisted on after he'd locked himself out twice. He stared at them for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Every logical brain cell screamed that this was insane. You don't give your house keys to a stranger. You don't hand over access to millions of dollars in art and furniture and electronics to someone you met 30 seconds ago on a rain-soaked street corner. There were proper channels. Charities. Shelters. But Rebecca's voice whispered in his memory, "The world doesn't need more convenient kindness, Christopher. It needs the kind that costs something." He pulled out $300 in cash and his American Express card, the one with no limit. Then he held out the keys. The woman stared at them like he'd offered her a live grenade. "My house," Christopher said. 1247 Mulholland Drive. The gate code is on the tag. There's food in the refrigerator, clean beds, hot water. Everything you need. "I don't," she shook her head violently. "I can't. I'm leaving for Singapore for 5 weeks. The house is empty. Completely empty." The truth of that statement hit him harder than the rain. "Please. Let it be useful for something." The baby made a small sound, and the woman's face crumpled just slightly before she forced it back to stoic. That tiny crack told him everything, how close to breaking she was, how long she'd been holding it together. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. Christopher looked at the infant, at those impossibly small fingers. "Because someone I loved would want me to." Simone Jackson had stopped believing in miracles around the same time she'd stopped believing in her ex-boyfriend's promises, which was roughly 14 months and 1 positive pregnancy test ago. Yet here she stood, soaking wet on a stranger's doorstep in the Hollywood Hills, holding keys that felt like they might evaporate if she breathed too hard. The mansion loomed before her, all stone and glass and iron gates that had opened when she'd punched in the code with shaking fingers. Hope squirmed against her chest, making the hungry sounds that meant they had maybe 20 minutes before a full meltdown. Simone had nursed her in a McDonald's bathroom an hour ago, but her daughter was going through a growth spurt, demanding food constantly from a body that was already running on empty. "This is crazy," Simone muttered, staring at the ornate front door. "This is absolutely crazy." The rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 3 months of homelessness, screamed that this was a trap. Rich white men didn't just hand over mansion keys to broke black women with babies. There had to be a catch. Cameras recording her for some sick reality show. Police waiting inside to arrest her for trespassing. Something. But Hope made that sound again, and Simone's milk-stained shirt was plastered to her skin, and the rain was coming down so hard she could barely see the car-lined street below. The duffel bag, containing everything she owned in the world, weighed heavy on her shoulder. She slid the key into the lock. The door swung open silently, revealing a 2-story foyer with a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than her mother's entire house back in Detroit. Simone stood frozen on the threshold, water pooling at her feet on marble floors so white they seemed to glow. "Hello." Her voice echoed through empty space. "Anyone here?" Silence answered. The kind of profound, cushioned silence that only serious money could buy. Simone stepped inside, easing the door closed behind her. The temperature inside was perfect, not too cold, not too warm, and the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something floral she couldn't identify. Her sneakers squeaked obscenely on the marble as she crept forward, half expecting alarms to start blaring. Nothing happened. To her right, a living room stretched out like something from a magazine. Cream-colored sofas, modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the twinkling lights of Los Angeles. To her left, a formal dining room with a table that could seat 14. Straight ahead, a sweeping staircase curved upward into darkness. Hope started fussing in earnest now, her face scrunching up for a cry. Simone bounced her automatically, scanning for somewhere, anywhere, she could feed her daughter without feeling like an intruder. The living room felt too exposed, too pristine. She couldn't imagine sitting on those perfect cream sofas with her wet clothes and leaking breasts. She moved deeper into the house, passing through a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Granite countertops, professional-grade appliances, a refrigerator the size of her old bedroom. Simone opened it cautiously, half expecting it to be empty despite what the man, Christopher, had said. It was stocked. Not fully, but enough. Milk, eggs, cheese, some wilted lettuce, takeout containers with dates from weeks ago. Evidence of a life interrupted. She grabbed the milk, sniffed it, still good, and felt tears prick her eyes for reasons she couldn't fully name. Beyond the kitchen, she found what must have been a sunroom. Windows on 3 sides, though the rain made them look like running watercolors. Dead plants lined the shelves, orchids mostly, their brown leaves curled and brittle. A reading nook with a cushioned bench. Dust motes floating in the gray light. This felt safer somehow. Less like a showroom and more like a space where actual humans had existed. Simone sank onto the bench, got hope latched, and finally let herself breathe. Her daughter nursed greedily, one tiny fist kneading against Simone's collarbone in that way that always melted her, no matter how tired or scared or desperate she felt. This was why she'd left Marcus. Why she'd walked out of his mother's house in Compton with nothing but a duffel bag when he'd come home high for the 3rd time in a week, when he'd looked at their 2-month-old daughter and said, maybe we should give her up. This is too hard. Too hard. As if hope was a gym membership or a Netflix subscription you could just cancel. We're okay, Simone whispered, stroking her daughter's downy hair. We're going to be okay. But even as she said it, the questions swarmed. What was she supposed to do here? Live like Goldilocks in someone else's house for 5 weeks? The man, Christopher, had given her his credit card, but that felt even more impossible to use than the keys. What if he changed his mind? What if this was some elaborate scheme she was too tired to figure out? Hope's eyes drifted closed, milk-drunk and satisfied. Simone looked down at her daughter, 6 months old and already she'd been through so much. Born in County USC with Medicaid covering the bills while Marcus paced in the waiting room, high as a kite. 2 months in a house that smelled like weed and failure. 3 months bouncing between shelters, friends' couches, bus stops, the back seat of Tanya's car until Tanya got evicted too. All because Simone had believed Marcus when he'd said he loved her, when he'd promised he'd get clean, when he'd sworn they'd be a family. She'd been so stupid. 24 years old with 2 years of community college and dreams of becoming an interior designer, all of it derailed by a charming smile and lies that sounded like poetry at 2 a.m. But we're here now, Simone told her sleeping daughter. And I'm going to figure this out. The rain hammered against the windows. Somewhere in this enormous house, there had to be a bathroom where she could wash the street off her skin. Maybe even a bedroom where she could sleep without one eye open. But first, she needed to make sure this wasn't a dream or a trap or a nightmare disguised as salvation. Simone stood carefully, hope secure in her arms, and began to explore the mansion that a grieving billionaire had handed her like it was nothing at all. The master bedroom was a shrine to loss. Simone found it on the 2nd floor, at the end of a hallway lined with black and white photographs of Los Angeles at dawn. The door stood ajar, and she pushed it open slowly, feeling like an archaeologist entering a tomb. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled as if someone had fought with them before giving up. Men's clothes draped over a chair by the window. On the nightstand, a half-empty glass of water had left a ring on the wood, and beside it sat a framed photograph that made Simone's breath catch. A woman. White, maybe 30, with honey blonde hair and a smile so genuine it seemed to light up the silver frame. She wore a sundress and gardening gloves, holding a massive orchid plant like it was a trophy. Behind her, Simone could see the sunroom downstairs, but alive, vibrant with green and purple blooms, sunlight streaming through clean windows. Christopher's wife. Had to be. The way he'd looked at that baby, the way he'd said someone I loved would want me to, it all made terrible, beautiful sense now. Simone backed out of the master bedroom like it might bite her. She couldn't sleep there. Wouldn't. This house was haunted by grief, and she was just a temporary ghost passing through. She found a guest room 3 doors down, smaller, impersonal, with a queen bed covered in a cream duvet that looked like it had never been slept in. The attached bathroom had pristine white towels and unopened bottles of expensive shampoo. Simone laid Hope in the center of the bed, surrounded by pillows as a makeshift barrier, and allowed herself the first hot shower she'd had in 6 weeks. The water pressure was incredible. She stood under the spray until her fingers pruned, washing away layers of bus station floors and shelter bathrooms and the particular grime that came from having nowhere to be. She used the fancy shampoo liberally, scraped dirt from under her fingernails, and tried not to think about how temporary this all was. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget used to be, Hope was still asleep. Simone dug through her duffel bag for the least dirty clothes she owned, A pair of leggings with a hole in the knee and an oversized Howard University t-shirt her mother had given her before the cancer took her 3 years ago. Mom. God, what would Mom think about this situation? Probably something wise about gift horses and mouths, delivered with that knowing look that said she could see right through Simone's defenses. Her stomach growled, loud enough to startle her. When had she last eaten? A granola bar this morning, stolen from a convenience store while the clerk wasn't looking. Before that, half a sandwich someone had left at the bus stop. The shame of it sat heavy in her chest. She'd never stolen anything before Hope was born. Never had to. Simone crept back downstairs, hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards, half expecting Christopher to materialize and ask what the hell she thought she was doing. But the house remained silent except for the rain, which had settled into a steady percussion against the windows. In the kitchen, she made herself scrambled eggs and toast, her hands shaking as she cracked the shells. The simple act of cooking in a real kitchen, with a working stove and clean pans and a sink that delivered hot water instantly, brought tears to her eyes. She ate standing at the counter, shoveling food into her mouth like it might disappear, then immediately felt sick from eating too fast. The clock on the stove read 9:47 p.m. Christopher's flight was probably taking off right now, carrying him across the Pacific to Singapore while a stranger fed her baby in his dead wife's sunroom and tried not to break down from the sheer impossibility of it all. Simone washed her dishes carefully, dried them, put them away exactly where she'd found them. Then she stood in the kitchen, paralyzed by possibility. 5 weeks. He'd said 5 weeks. What was she supposed to do for 5 weeks? Her eyes landed on a notepad by the phone, expensive stationery with Bennett Holdings embossed at the top. She found a pen and started writing, her hand moving almost automatically. Mr. Bennett. I don't know if you'll even see this or if you already regret giving me your keys. I don't know if this is real or if I'm going to wake up under that bus shelter and realize I hallucinated the whole thing. But just in case, thank you. I promise I won't steal anything. I promise I'll take care of your house. I promise this matters more than you could possibly know. My daughter's name is Hope. I named her that because I needed to believe in something when she was born. Maybe you needed to believe in something too when you stopped your car tonight. Thank you for stopping. Simone Jackson. She left the note on the kitchen counter, weighted down with a salt shaker, then went back upstairs to check on Hope. Her daughter had rolled slightly but was still asleep, her rosebud mouth pursed in dreams. Simone climbed into bed beside her, careful not to jostle the mattress. The sheets smelled like expensive detergent. The mattress didn't have any suspicious lumps or springs poking through. No roaches scuttled across the ceiling. No one was going to pound on the door at midnight and tell them to get out. For the first time in 3 months, Simone felt safe enough to close both eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind raced through scenarios. What if he called the police? What if this was some sick test? What if someone broke in and she got blamed? What if Child Protective Services found out she was squatting in a mansion and took Hope away? That last thought made her heart seize. She pulled her daughter closer, breathed in the baby powder scent of her, and made a silent vow. Whatever this was, charity, pity, temporary insanity, she wouldn't waste it. 5 weeks. She had 5 weeks to figure out how to build a real life for Hope. 5 weeks to become the mother her daughter deserved. Starting tomorrow, everything would change. Simone woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and for 3 disorienting seconds, forgot where she was. Then Hope gurgled beside her, and reality crashed back. The mansion, the keys, the billionaire who'd vanished to Singapore after appending her entire world. She checked her phone, 6:47 a.m. The ancient Android, screen cracked, battery dying at 40%, showed no missed calls. No messages from Christopher saying he'd changed his mind. No police at the door. Just another day of temporary salvation. Hope needed changing, feeding, and Simone's breasts ached with fullness. She handled the morning routine on autopilot, her mind already spinning. 5 weeks felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. What came after? She couldn't go back to the shelters, they had a 30-day maximum stay, and she'd burned through most facilities in the area. Tanya had moved to Riverside with her new boyfriend. Marcus? She'd rather die than crawl back to him. After nursing Hope in the sunroom, those dead orchids bothering her more than they should, Simone made a decision. If she was going to live here like some kind of accidental houseguest, the least she could do was make herself useful. She started small. Dishes in the sink, week-old takeout containers in the fridge. She found trash bags under the sink and threw out expired food, wiped down counters, swept floors that probably hadn't been touched in months. Hope played on a blanket in the kitchen, batting at her few toys, a rattle missing half its beads, a stuffed elephant with one ear. The house revealed itself slowly. A gym upstairs with equipment covered in dust. A home office with a mahogany desk buried under paperwork. Bathrooms with soap scum on the glass. The master bedroom she avoided completely, but the other spaces, for guest rooms, a media room with a screen the size of her old apartment's wall, all showed signs of neglect. It wasn't filthy, exactly. More like abandoned. As if Christopher had stopped seeing the house entirely and just moved through it like a ghost. By noon, Simone had cleaned the kitchen until it gleamed, vacuumed the downstairs, and worked up enough courage to tackle the sunroom. Those dead orchids haunted her. She'd taken 2 semesters of horticulture at community college before the money ran out, back when she dreamed of landscape design. These plants weren't just dead, they'd been loved once. Meticulously cared for, judging by the specialized pots and the watering schedule still taped to the shelf in the woman's handwriting. Rebecca. The name was on a piece of mail Simone had seen in the office. Rebecca Bennett. Simone gathered the dead plants carefully, whispering apologies she knew were ridiculous. She found the trash bins in the garage, along with a BMW, a vintage Porsche, and enough expensive equipment to fund a small country, and disposed of the brown leaves and brittle stems. Then she scrubbed the shelves, washed the windows until they sparkled, and stood back to survey the empty space. The sunroom looked naked now. Sad. But also ready for something new. Hope started fussing around 2 p.m., tired, overstimulated by the new environment. Simone took her upstairs for a nap, then did something that felt dangerously presumptuous. She opened Christopher's laptop, which sat unlocked on the office desk. Her heart hammered as the screen lit up. This was snooping. This was wrong. But she needed internet access, and her phone's data had run out days ago. The browser history told a story: grief support forums, business reports, flights to Singapore, nothing personal. His email was open, hundreds of unread messages, mostly work-related. Simone didn't read them. Instead, she opened a new tab and searched for something that had been gnawing at her since last night. GED programs Los Angeles free. The results bloomed across the screen. She dropped out of high school at 17 when mom got sick, had earned her GED while working at Target, then started community college. But that felt like a different lifetime. What she needed now was something more: certifications, skills, anything that could translate into a job that would let her afford rent and daycare and a life. She found a program at the community center in West Hollywood. Free classes, childcare available, starts in 2 weeks. Her fingers hovered over the registration button, then clicked before she could talk herself out of it. Next, she searched interior design courses online free. If she was going to be stuck in this mansion for 5 weeks, she might as well learn something. YouTube tutorials, free introductory courses from Coursera, design blogs. Simone bookmarked everything, her mind already racing with possibilities. When Hope woke an hour later, Simone felt something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. She spent the rest of the afternoon continuing her cleaning campaign, Hope strapped to her chest in the baby carrier. The house was enormous. She could clean for weeks and still find corners she'd missed. But there was something meditative about it. Wiping away dust felt like wiping away her own cobwebs. Scrubbing floors felt like scrubbing away the shame of the last 3 months. Around 6 p.m., her stomach reminded her she'd forgotten lunch. Simone made pasta with the Jared sauce she'd found in the pantry, ate it in the kitchen while Hope sat in a high chair Simone had discovered in the garage, gumming a piece of bread. That's when she noticed the credit card Christopher had given her, still in her duffel bag along with the $300 cash. She'd been too terrified to touch it, convinced it would somehow incriminate her. But looking at Hope, at her daughter who needed diapers, formula for emergencies, clothes that actually fit, Simone made another decision. Tomorrow, she'd go shopping. Just necessities. She'd keep every receipt, document every purchase. When Christopher came back, she'd pay him back somehow, even if it took years. Tonight, though, she'd keep cleaning. Keep making this mausoleum feel less like a tomb and more like a space where healing might be possible. As she washed her dinner dishes, Simone caught her reflection in the kitchen window, tired but not defeated, scared but not hopeless. Behind her reflection, the lights of Los Angeles glittered like fallen stars. "We're going to make it," she told Hope, who responded with a gummy smile that made everything feel possible. The Target in West Hollywood felt like a palace compared to the one Simone used to shoplift granola bars from. She pushed the cart slowly, Hope secured in the seat, Christopher's credit card burning a hole in her pocket like stolen fire. "Just necessities," she muttered, scanning the baby aisle. "Diapers, wipes, maybe some onesies that don't have stains." But her hands shook as she reached for the Pampers, the good kind, not the store brand that leaked by morning. $40 for one box. She could have fed herself for a week on $40 back when she had her Target job, before she got fired for missing too many shifts during Mom's final month. A woman in yoga pants gave her a look, that particular once-over that cataloged Simone's thrift store jeans, her Howard t-shirt with a stretched collar, her scuffed sneakers. The look that said you don't belong here. Simone lifted her chin and dropped 2 boxes of diapers in the cart. By the time she reached the checkout, the cart held diapers, wipes, formula, 6 onesies on clearance, a pack of washcloths, baby shampoo, and, after an internal debate that lasted 5 full minutes, a coffee maker. The house had an expensive espresso machine that looked like it required an engineering degree, but Simone just wanted regular coffee. Something normal. Something hers. The total came to $287.43. The cashier, a tired-looking Latina woman with roots showing, swiped the card without comment, and Simone half expected alarms to sound, police to materialize, someone to yell that she was a fraud. Instead, the receipt printed and the woman said, "Have a nice day," with the automated cheerfulness of someone who'd said it 10,000 times. Simone practically ran to the bus stop, Hope secure in her carrier, shopping bags cutting into her wrists. She'd taken the bus here, didn't trust herself with the BMW, even though the keys hung right there in the kitchen. The 40-minute ride back to Mulholland Drive felt eternal, every bump making her paranoid that someone would rob her, that child services would appear, that this fragile bubble of safety would pop. But nothing happened. She got off at her stop, walked the steep hill to the mansion, punched in the gate code, and let herself into a house that still didn't feel real. The coffee maker looked pathetically small on the granite counter, like a toy in a dollhouse made for giants. But when Simone brewed her first cup, the smell alone almost made her cry. It felt like reclaiming something. She stood at the kitchen window, Hope playing on her blanket nearby, and let the hot liquid burn away some of the constant anxiety. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Simone's stomach dropped, but she answered anyway. "Is this Simone Jackson?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "Yes. This is Angela Rodriguez from the West Hollywood Community Center. I'm calling about your GED program registration. We have an opening in our accelerated track starting Monday if you're interested. It's intensive, 4 days a week, 3 hours per session, but you could complete it in 8 weeks instead of 12. Simone's mouth went dry. "Monday? That's in 3 days. I know it's short notice. We had a cancellation. But I saw in your application that you'd completed 2 years of community college, so you'd likely test out of several modules. And you indicated you needed childcare." "Yes. I have a 6-month-old. We can accommodate that. Our childcare center is free for program participants." A pause. "Ms. Jackson, I looked at your transcripts. You had a 3.7 GPA before you withdrew. With your background, you could finish this program and potentially move into our vocational training track. We have partnerships with several design firms for internships." Design firms. The words hit Simone like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. "I'll be there Monday," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. After hanging up, Simone stood frozen in the kitchen, coffee growing cold in her hand. This was real. This was happening. She had 3 days to prepare for something that could actually change her life, assuming Christopher didn't come back early and revoke his charity, assuming the house didn't evaporate like a fever dream, assuming she didn't somehow sabotage this the way she'd sabotaged everything else. "Stop it," she told herself. "Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." She spent the rest of the day in a cleaning frenzy that was definitely procrastination disguised as productivity. She tackled the master bathroom, neutral territory since it wasn't the bedroom itself, scrubbing the marble shower until it gleamed, organizing toiletries, folding towels into the fancy thirds she'd learned from YouTube. Then the hallway, the stairs, the foyer with its ridiculous chandelier that she cleaned with a stepladder and a microfiber cloth, terrified the entire time that she'd break a crystal and owe Christopher thousands. By evening, exhausted and sweaty, Simone found herself back in the sunroom. Those empty shelves bothered her. She pulled out Christopher's laptop again, searched Easy Indoor Plants Los Angeles, and fell down a rabbit hole of care guides and design blogs. The orchids had been Rebecca's thing, clearly. Simone wouldn't touch that. But maybe something else. Something that signaled life instead of death. She added pothos, snake plants, and a prayer plant to a mental shopping list, then immediately felt guilty. Plants weren't necessities. Christopher had given her his credit card for essentials, not interior decorating. But looking at those empty shelves, at the space where love and care had once existed, Simone couldn't shake the feeling that bringing life back to this room might be the most essential thing she could do. Hope babbled from her blanket, and Simone scooped her up, burying her face in her daughter's neck. "What do you think, baby girl? Am I crazy? Am I about to mess up the best thing that's ever happened to us?" Hope grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked, which Simone chose to interpret as encouragement. That night, after Hope was asleep, Simone updated the note she'd left on the kitchen counter. "Mr. Bennett, Day 3. I cleaned the bathrooms and bought diapers. Total spent, $287.43. I'll pay you back. Also, I'm starting a GED program Monday. I promise I'm not taking advantage. I'm just trying to build something." Week 2 arrived with the kind of momentum that scared Simone almost as much as it thrilled her. The GED classes were brutal. 3 hours of math, English, social studies, and science crammed into sessions that left her brain feeling like overcooked pasta. But she was good at it. Better than good. The instructor, Mrs. Chun, had pulled her aside after the second class. "You're going to finish this program in 6 weeks, not 8, she'd said, tapping Simone's practice test. "You scored in the 95th percentile on the diagnostic. Why did you even drop out?" Simone had given her the abbreviated version: sick mother, bills, bad choices. Mrs. Chun had nodded with the weary understanding of someone who'd heard similar stories 1,000 times, then handed her a brochure for the vocational design program. "Start thinking about this. You've got talent." Talent. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Now, on a Thursday afternoon with Hope napping upstairs, Simone sat cross-legged on the sunroom floor, surrounded by new plants she'd bought with Christopher's credit card after an internal debate that lasted 2 full days. $73. She'd kept the receipt naturally, adding it to the growing pile in the office drawer she designated as her debt-to-repay file. The pothos hung in the corner where an orchid had died, its trailing vines already reaching toward the light. Snake plants flanked the reading nook, nearly indestructible, according to the nursery worker. The prayer plant sat on the shelf where Rebecca's prized specimen had been, its leaves folded up like hands in supplication. Simone wasn't replacing Rebecca's garden. She was creating something different. Something that acknowledged the past while daring to imagine a future. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She'd learned to answer these now. They were usually the community center, sometimes the free clinic where she'd taken Hope for a checkup, once a grocery store confirming her application for a cashier position. She declined, too terrified to leave the mansion for a regular schedule. "Ms. Jackson? This is Patricia Thornton from Los Angeles Child Protective Services." The world tilted sideways. Simone's hand clenched around the phone so hard her knuckles went white. "Yes. We received a report about your daughter, Hope Jackson. The report indicated she might be living in unstable conditions. I need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation." "A report." Simone's voice came out strangled. "From who?" "I can't disclose that information. But this is routine. We're not accusing you of anything. We just need to verify that Hope is in a safe, appropriate environment." A pause. "The address we have is 1247 Mulholland Drive. Is that current?" Simone's mind raced. Someone had reported her. Someone had seen her with Hope, at the park last week when she'd taken her daughter to the playground? At Target? At the community center? And decided she didn't deserve her baby. Or maybe they'd seen her going into this mansion and assumed she was squatting, assumed she was unfit, assumed. "Ms. Jackson." "Yes. That's my address." The lie tasted like ash. It wasn't her address. It would never be her address. This was borrowed time in someone else's life, and now it was about to cost her everything. I can come by tomorrow at 2 p.m. Will you be available? What choice did she have? Yes. After hanging up, Simone sat frozen on the sunroom floor, the new plants suddenly mocking her with their vitality. Of course this was too good to be true. Of course the universe wouldn't just let her have this. She'd been homeless, desperate, sleeping in bus shelters with an infant. That's all CPS would see. Not the GED classes, not the clean house, not the fact that Hope was healthy and loved and thriving. They'd see a black woman living in a white billionaire's mansion and assume the worst. Simone's breath came in short gasps. Panic attack. She'd had enough of them to recognize the signs. But she couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not with Hope upstairs sleeping, innocent and unaware that her mother's past was about to catch up with them. She pulled out her phone again, fingers shaking, and did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She searched for Christopher Bennett's number. He'd written it on the notepad in the kitchen, in case of emergency. This qualified as an emergency. But as her finger hovered over the call button, reality crashed down. What was she going to say? Hi, remember me, the homeless woman you gave your house to? CPS is coming and I need you to vouch for me, to confirm I'm not just some squatter who broke in. He was in Singapore. It was, she checked the time, 3 a.m. there. And even if he answered, what could he do from 8,000 miles away? Simone set the phone down and forced herself to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique her mom had taught her when anxiety first started eating her alive in high school. She had until tomorrow at 2 p.m. 22 hours to prepare for someone to judge whether she deserved to keep her daughter. 22 hours to make this borrowed mansion look like a legitimate home instead of a fantasy she'd stumbled into. Simone stood up, her legs unsteady, and surveyed the sunroom. Then the kitchen, where her coffee maker sat next to Christopher's espresso machine. The guest bedroom where Hope's few toys were scattered across the floor. The note she'd left on the counter, documenting every dollar spent like a guilty conscience made paper. Evidence of her life here. Evidence that she was trying. Evidence that might not be enough. Hope started crying upstairs, awake from her nap, hungry, needing her mother. Simone climbed the stairs on autopilot, lifted her daughter from the bed, and held her close. I'm not going to let them take you, she whispered into Hope's hair. I don't care what I have to do. You're mine. But even as she said it, the fear whispered back, for how much longer? Patricia Thornton arrived at exactly 2 p.m. in a Honda Civic that had seen better days, carrying a leather portfolio and an expression Simone couldn't read. She was black too, late 40s, hair in neat twists, sensible flats, and Simone didn't know if that would help or hurt. Sometimes the hardest judges were the ones who'd clawed their way up and expected everyone else to do the same. Ms. Jackson. Patricia extended her hand at the door. Thank you for making time. As if Simone had a choice. Please come in. She'd spent all of last night and this morning preparing. The house was immaculate. She'd cleaned surfaces that were already clean, organized closets Patricia would probably never see, rehearsed answers to questions she could only guess at. Hope wore her nicest onesie, one of the new ones from Target, yellow with ducks, and Simone had dressed in the one decent outfit she owned, black slacks from her Target days and a button-down blouse she'd found at Goodwill. Patricia's eyes swept the foyer, and Simone watched her take in the chandelier, the marble, the original artwork. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. This is quite a home, Patricia said carefully. I'm house-sitting, Simone said, the lie she'd prepared sitting heavy on her tongue. For a family friend. He's traveling for business. I see. Patricia pulled out a tablet. Can you show me where Hope sleeps? Simone led her upstairs, Hope balanced on her hip. The guest bedroom looked lived in but not chaotic. The crib she'd found in the garage and scrubbed until it gleamed, clean sheets, Hope's mobile hanging overhead. Her few toys organized in a basket. The bottles drying on a towel by the bathroom sink. Patricia made notes. How long have you been staying here? 2 weeks. And before that? Here it was. The question Simone had been dreading. She could lie, but lies had a way of multiplying, of tripping you up. And something about Patricia's face, tired but not unkind, made her choose truth. We were between places, Simone said quietly. I left my daughter's father because of his drug use. Stayed with a friend until she got evicted. Spent some time in shelters, but they have time limits. I was figuring things out when this opportunity came up. So you were homeless? Not a question. Yes. Simone's arms tightened around Hope. But I never let her go without. She's been to every checkup. She's up to date on vaccines. I nursed her even when I hadn't eaten. I kept her clean and warm and safe, even when, her voice cracked. Even when I had nothing. Patricia looked up from her tablet, and something in her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. I'm not here to judge your circumstances, Ms. Jackson. I'm here to assess whether Hope is in a safe, stable environment now. Can you show me where you prepare her bottles? They went back downstairs. Simone demonstrated the kitchen, formula at the right temperature, sterilized bottles, the high chair she'd found and cleaned. She showed Patricia the sunroom where she played with Hope during tummy time, the new plants catching afternoon light. The living room where she'd set up a play mat. You mentioned your house sitting, Patricia said. Does the owner know you have an infant here? Yes. He encouraged it. He gave me his house specifically because Hope and I needed somewhere safe. Simone pulled out her phone, showed Patricia the photos she'd been taking to document the house's transformation, before and after shots of each room. I've been taking care of the place. Cleaning, organizing. He'd let it go after his wife died. Patricia studied the photos. You've done a lot of work here. I wanted to earn my keep. He was kind to us. The least I could do was, Simone gestured helplessly at the gleaming surfaces, the revived sunroom. Make it feel like a home again instead of a tomb. And when this house-sitting arrangement ends? The question Simone asked herself every night at 3 a.m. I'm enrolled in an accelerated GED program. I finish in 4 weeks. Then I'm applying for the vocational design training at the community center. They have job placement services. I'm building something sustainable. Patricia made more notes, and Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. This woman held all the power. One stroke of her pen could destroy everything. Can I hold her? Patricia asked suddenly. Simone hesitated, then passed Hope over. Her daughter went willingly, curious about the new face. Patricia bounced her gently, and Hope grabbed at her twists, babbling. She's healthy, Patricia observed. Alert, responsive, appropriate weight. No signs of neglect or distress. She handed Hope back. Ms. Jackson, the report we received came from someone at the park who saw you with Hope and was concerned you might be unhoused. They meant well, but they didn't have the full picture. Relief flooded through Simone so fast she felt dizzy. So? I'm going to close this case as unfounded. You clearly love your daughter and are providing appropriate care. The fact that you experienced homelessness doesn't make you an unfit mother. It makes you someone who kept her child safe during an incredibly difficult time. Patricia pulled out a card. But I want you to keep this. If you need resources, food assistance, housing support, childcare vouchers, call me directly. Don't wait until you're desperate again. Simone took the card with shaking hands. Thank you. One more thing. Patricia glanced around the mansion again. This house-sitting arrangement, make sure you have documentation. A lease, written permission, something on paper. Because if someone else reports this and the owner's out of the country, it could look like squatting. Protect yourself legally. After Patricia left, Simone sank onto the sunroom bench, Hope in her arms, and finally let herself cry. Relief, terror, exhaustion. It all poured out in silent sobs that shook her shoulders while her daughter patted her face with chubby hands. She'd survived. They'd survived. But Patricia's warning echoed. Protect yourself legally. How did you legally protect a fairy tale? The email from Christopher came 3 weeks into his trip, at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when Simone was studying for her social studies module at the kitchen table. Subject: checking in. Simone. I hope this message finds you and Hope well. I've been meaning to write, but the days here blur together. Meetings, site visits, negotiations that go nowhere. Singapore is efficient and sterile and nothing like home. I've been thinking about what I did. Giving you my keys. It was impulsive, possibly reckless, definitely the kind of thing my brother would call me an idiot for. But I haven't regretted it once. There's something clarifying about being 8,000 miles away. You see what matters differently. I want you to know this isn't charity with an expiration date. When I get back, I'd like to discuss a more permanent arrangement. The house needs someone living in it. You need stability. Hope needs a safe place to grow. Maybe we can help each other. No pressure. Just think about it. Also, my security system sent me photos. The sunroom looks alive again. Thank you for that. Rebecca would have liked you. Christopher. Simone read it 17 times, parsing each sentence for hidden meanings or traps. More permanent arrangement. What did that mean? Employee? Tenant? Was he offering her a job or just extending the fantasy another few months before reality inevitably crashed down? She started typing a response 6 different times, deleted them all. What do you say to a man who'd handed you salvation and was now suggesting it might not be temporary? How do you explain that you'd spent 3 weeks terrified of disappointing him, of breaking something, of proving you didn't deserve this gift? Finally, at 1 a.m. she wrote, Mr. Bennett. Hope is thriving. She's started sitting up on her own this week. I'm ahead in my GED classes. Mrs. Chun thinks I'll finish in 3 weeks instead of 6. The house is good. I've kept track of every dollar spent, $847.32 total, receipts in the office drawer. I would like to discuss a permanent arrangement when you return. I'm scared to hope for it, but I'd like to. The sunroom plants are just rentals until yours come back. I didn't want to replace what you lost. Just fill the space while it heals. Simone. She hit send before she could overthink it, then sat staring at the laptop screen like it might offer answers to questions she hadn't yet figured out how to ask. The next day brought another disruption, this one in the form of a man in an expensive suit who appeared at the gate, buzzing the intercom with aggressive persistence. I'm looking for Christopher Bennett, the voice crackled through the speaker. Tell him his brother is here. Simone's stomach dropped. She pressed the button. Mr. Bennett is in Singapore. I know where he is. Who the hell are you? She should have lied. Should have said she was the housekeeper or a friend or literally anything other than the truth. But something about the hostility in his voice made her defiant. I'm Simone Jackson. Mr. Bennett gave me permission to stay here. A long pause. Open the gate. Now. Simone stood at the front door, hope on her hip like a shield, as a silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The man who emerged looked like Christopher might if you subtracted empathy and added entitlement. Same blue eyes, same build, but harder. Colder. Thomas Bennett, he said, not offering his hand. Mind explaining what you're doing in my brother's house? He gave me his keys. I'm taking care of the place while he's away. Thomas laughed, sharp, humorless. He gave his keys to a complete stranger. Jesus Christ, Chris. He pushed past her into the foyer, and Simone bristled but stepped aside. Where's the laptop? I need to check if you've accessed his accounts. I haven't touched his accounts. I've used the credit card he gave me for necessities, diapers, food, supplies. Every receipt is documented. Thomas spun to face her. Do you have any idea what this house is worth? The art alone is valued at over $3 million. He has a vintage car collection, original Hockneys, jewelry that belonged to our grandmother. And he just gave you access. He gave me kindness, Simone said quietly. That's all I've taken. Something in Thomas's expression shifted, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. He looked at Hope, then at Simone, really looked this time. Took in her carefully maintained composure, the clean house behind her, the baby who was healthy and calm. Show me what you've done, he said finally. So she did. Room by room, Simone walked Thomas through the transformation. The cleaned kitchen, the organized office, the revived sunroom with its new plants. She showed him the debt drawer with its neat stack of receipts. The before and after photos on her phone. The GED textbooks on the kitchen table, her class schedule on the refrigerator held up by a magnet. In the sunroom, Thomas stopped. Stared at the plants, at the empty spaces where Rebecca's orchids had been. She loved those damn orchids, he said, his voice rough. Spent hours fussing over them. After she died, Chris couldn't even look at this room. I know, Simone said. That's why I didn't try to replace them. I couldn't leave it empty. Thomas turned to her, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He's been dead inside for 18 months. Not eating, not sleeping, just working himself into the ground, because that's the only thing that feels like control. He gestured at the sunroom, at the light streaming through clean windows. This is the first sign of life I've seen from him since the funeral. I didn't do anything special, Simone protested. I just cleaned. You made his house feel like a home again. You think that's nothing? Thomas pulled out his phone. I'm calling him. It's 3 a.m. in Singapore. I don't care. Simone listened, hope babbling in her arms, as Thomas spoke to his brother in clipped sentences that gradually softened. You should have told me. No, she's not a con artist. She's legitimate. Chris, you should see this place. Okay, I will. He hung up. Looked at Simone for a long moment. He wants me to draw up a contract. Official employment as estate manager, plus housing. Salary, benefits, the whole thing. Christopher Bennett's hands shook as he pushed open the front door of his mansion, the same key Simone had used for 5 weeks now warm in his palm. Singapore had been successful, contracts signed, expansion secured, 47 million reasons to celebrate. But all he'd thought about on the 14-hour flight was whether he'd made the biggest mistake of his life or the first right decision since Rebecca died. The house smelled different. Not the stale air and lemon polish of neglect, but something alive: coffee, baby powder, the green scent of growing things. Light poured through windows he didn't remember being so clean. Hello. His voice echoed differently now, absorbed by spaces that felt occupied instead of empty. Mr. Bennett. Simone appeared from the kitchen, hope on her hip, and Christopher's breath caught. She looked different too, still thin, still wary, but not desperate. Not defeated. Her hair was in neat braids, and she wore jeans without holes and a blue sweater that made her dark eyes luminous. Hope had grown impossibly bigger in 5 weeks, her cheeks round and her smile instant when she saw him. Christopher, he corrected automatically. Please. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, billionaire and single mother, stranger and stranger, two people whose lives had collided in a rainstorm and somehow rearranged into something neither could have predicted. I got your brother's contract, Simone said finally. Estate manager. That's generous. Maybe too generous. You've earned it. Come see. He walked through his house like a man touring a museum of his own life, but better. The kitchen gleamed. The office was organized, papers sorted into labeled folders with a system he could actually understand. The media room had been dusted, the gym equipment uncovered. Every surface showed evidence of care, of attention, of someone seeing value in spaces he'd abandoned. But it was the sunroom that stopped him cold. The orchids were gone, he'd expected that. What he hadn't expected was the life that had replaced them. Plants he didn't recognize but that Rebecca would have loved, positioned to catch the light just like she taught him years ago. The windows so clean they might as well have been invisible. The reading nook where Rebecca used to curl up with design magazines, now equipped with a soft blanket and a baby mobile nearby. Different, but not erased. Honored, but not frozen. I hope it's okay, Simone said softly from the doorway. I didn't want to. I wasn't trying to replace anything. Just fill the space until it was ready for something new. Christopher's throat tightened. It's perfect. He sank onto the reading bench, and Simone hesitated before sitting beside him, hope between them like a tiny bridge. The baby reached for his watch, fascinated by the way it caught the light. I finished my GED, Simone said. Scored in the 97th percentile. Mrs. Chun says I should apply to the design program, but I don't know if I can manage school and work and hope. What if you could? Christopher turned to face her. What if the job came with flexible hours, childcare support, tuition assistance? That's not in the contract Thomas sent. Because I'm amending it. You brought my house back to life, Simone. You saw potential in spaces I'd given up on. That's not just cleaning, that's design instinct. If you want to study interior design, I'll support that. If you want to work on Bennett Holdings properties, practice your skills, I'll make that happen. Simone's eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want him to see. Why are you doing this? Because Rebecca would have stopped that night, Christopher said simply. She would have seen you and hope and moved heaven and earth to help. I was so deep in my grief I almost didn't. But I did, and look, he gestured at the sunroom, at the life surrounding them. Look what happened. You didn't just take my charity. You transformed it into something mutual. You gave me a reason to come home. Hope grabbed his finger, and Christopher laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. When was the last time he'd laughed? Really laughed, not the polite chuckle he'd perfected for board meetings? I'm scared, Simone admitted. I'm scared this is temporary. That I'll mess up or you'll change your mind or the universe will remember I don't deserve good things. What if you do deserve them? Christopher met her eyes. What if kindness isn't something you have to earn but something you're allowed to receive? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Hope babbled, oblivious to the moment she was witnessing, two broken people finding their way toward something that might be healing. Over the next 6 months, the mansion transformed from house to home in ways Christopher hadn't thought possible. Simone enrolled in the design program, her natural talent evident in every project. She converted one of the guest rooms into a studio, filling it with fabric swatches and paint samples and sketches that reminded Christopher of Rebecca's creative chaos, but distinctly Simone's own. Hope grew into a toddler who called him Criffer, and left toys in every room, evidence of life that made Christopher smile instead of flinch. Simone hired a part-time nanny, a grandmother named Gloria who'd raised 6 kids and treated Hope like number 7, so she could focus on classes. The house filled with sounds, Hope's laughter, Simone's music while she studied, Gloria's humming in the kitchen. Christopher found himself coming home earlier, skipping unnecessary meetings, teaching Hope to kick a ball in the backyard where Rebecca's vegetable garden had once been. And somewhere in those 6 months, gratitude shifted into something deeper. It happened in small moments. Simone laughing at his terrible jokes. Christopher helping her practice design presentations, watching her confidence bloom. The way she'd started leaving coffee made his way in the morning. The way he'd started buying the specific brand of tea she liked. Hope falling asleep on his chest during movie nights. The three of them becoming something that felt dangerously close to family. But Christopher was careful. Painfully careful. Simone worked for him, depended on him, and he wouldn't abuse that power dynamic. Wouldn't risk making her uncomfortable or pressured. So he kept his distance, even when he wanted to close it. Simone, it turned out, was doing the same thing. I'm moving out, she announced one evening in the sunroom, their space now, where they gravitated for serious conversations. Hope was asleep upstairs, and Simone clutched a mug of tea like a lifeline. I found an apartment in West Hollywood. 2 bedrooms, affordable with my salary. I've saved enough for first and last month's rent. Christopher's heart dropped. You don't have to leave. There's plenty of space here. I know. But I need to. She looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly undid him. I need to prove I can stand on my own. That I'm not just dependent on your charity. It stopped being charity months ago. I know that too. But Christopher, she set down the mug, twisted her hands together. I can't figure out what I'm feeling when I'm living in your house, working for you, owing you everything. I need space to know if what I feel is real or just gratitude with nowhere else to go. He understood. God, he understood. When do you leave? 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks felt both endless and instant. Christopher helped her apartment hunt, co-signed the lease, loaded furniture into a truck. Simone painted Hope's new room yellow, sunshine yellow, she called it. Gloria agreed to split time between both locations. The mansion felt enormous and empty again, but differently this time. Not like a tomb. Like a space waiting. Christopher gave Simone 6 months. 6 months of her living independently, proving to herself what he already knew, that she was brilliant and capable and didn't need saving. 6 months of Sunday dinners where he'd come to her apartment, bringing groceries and playing with Hope while Simone cooked. 6 months of her finishing the design program with top marks, getting offered an internship at a prestigious firm, turning it down to start freelancing instead. I want to build my own thing, she told him over coffee at her kitchen table. Tiny compared to his, but warm in a way his had never been. Something that's mine. 6 months of Christopher waking up alone and wishing he wasn't. Of Simone calling him at odd hours to talk through design challenges or share Hope's latest word. Of both of them dancing around what everyone else could see, Thomas rolling his eyes, Gloria muttering about stubborn fools, Hope patting both their faces like she could push them together through sheer will. On the 6-month anniversary of Simone's move, Christopher asked her to come to the mansion. "I have something to show you." She arrived in the evening, hope in a carrier on her back, curiosity evident in her expression. Christopher led them to the sunroom, where he'd spent the last month on a project that either made perfect sense or was completely insane. In the corner where Simone's first pothose had hung, where Rebecca's prized orchid had once lived, Christopher had installed a small fountain. Water cascaded over river stones, catching the sunset light through the windows. On the base, a bronze plaque read, "For Rebecca, who taught me to love. For Simone, who taught me to live again. For Hope, who is both." Simone's hand flew to her mouth. "Christopher." "I spent 18 months in grief," he said, the words he'd rehearsed suddenly inadequate. "Convinced that moving forward meant betraying Rebecca. But you showed me that healing doesn't erase what we've lost. It honors it by choosing to live fully again." He took her hand, their first real touch that wasn't accidental, wasn't professional. "I'm not your employer anymore. You work for yourself now. I'm not your charity case, you never were mine. We're just two people who found each other in a rainstorm and saved each other in ways neither of us expected." "Christopher." "I'm in love with you," he continued, needing to say it all before courage failed. "I have been for months. But I needed you to know you were free first. Free to choose or not choose. Free to build your own life. And now that you have," he pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a simple diamond ring. "Now I'm asking if you'd consider building that life with me. Not as employee and employer. Not as charity and benefactor. As partners. As equals. As family." Simone's tears spilled over. Hope, sensing the emotion, started squirming in her carrier, babbling Criffer. Criffer. "Yes," Simone whispered. "Yes, you ridiculous man. I've been in love with you since you helped me repot that prayer plant in month 2 and didn't laugh when I cried over dirt." She laughed through her tears. "I just needed to make sure I was loving you, not the safety you represented. And now I know the difference. You're the safety I choose, not the safety I need. There's a difference." Christopher slid the ring on her finger, then pulled both her and Hope into his arms. In the sunroom where Death had once lived, surrounded by plants that thrived and water that flowed and light that poured through clean windows, 3 people became a family. The wedding happened 6 months later in the garden. Small, intimate, just family and the people who'd walked beside them through transformation. Hope toddled down the aisle in a yellow dress, dropping flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Thomas stood as best man, his toast acknowledging that sometimes the craziest decisions turn out to be the wisest. Mrs. Chin attended with half the GED class. Gloria cried through the entire ceremony. Christopher and Simone exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about choosing each other daily, about honoring both past and future, about building something new while respecting what came before. "I give you my keys," Christopher said, echoing that rainy night. "Not because you need them, but because I want you to have them. All of them. To every part of my life." "I give you my trust," Simone replied. "Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. One kind decision at a time." When they kissed, Hope shouted yay. And everyone laughed, and the fountain in the sunroom could be heard through open windows. Water cascading, life flowing, everything transformed. 5 years later, Simone stood at a podium in a Los Angeles conference center, addressing 200 people at a design symposium. Hope sat in the front row between Christopher and Gloria, coloring in a book but occasionally looking up at her mother with pride. "People ask how I broke into interior design without connections or traditional training," Simone said, her voice steady and confident. "The truth is, I broke in through kindness. A stranger gave me his keys when I had nothing, and in taking care of his space, I discovered my gift. In honoring his grief, I learned about transformation. In accepting his generosity, I learned I was worth investing in." She caught Christopher's eye, saw him smile the way he always did when she talked about their story. "But here's what I want you to understand. Kindness isn't charity. Real kindness is mutual. It transforms both the giver and the receiver. It creates cycles instead of debts. That man gave me his house, yes. But I gave him back his home. He gave me opportunity. I gave him purpose. He gave me love. I gave him family. Neither of us would be who we are today without that rainstorm and that impossibly generous, possibly crazy decision to stop. The audience applauded. Hope waved enthusiastically. Christopher's hand found hers as she returned to her seat, their rings catching the light, symbols of a love born from rain and keys and the radical choice to see possibility in desperation. That night, after Hope was asleep in her yellow room in the mansion that was truly home now, Christopher and Simone stood in the sunroom. The fountain burbled softly. The plants, a collection now, accumulated over years, tended together, reached toward moonlight through spotless windows. "Do you ever think about that night?" Simone asked, leaning into his embrace. "Every day," Christopher admitted. "Best decision I ever made." "Even though it was crazy?" "Especially because it was crazy." He kissed the top of her head. "Rebecca used to say that the best things in life require a leap of faith. I just didn't know my leap would be handing my keys to a stranger in the rain." "I'm glad you jumped," Simone whispered. "I'm glad you caught me." In the sunroom where death had once lived, where plants now thrived and water flowed eternal, two people who'd found each other in the storm stood in the calm they'd built together, proof that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest act of impossible kindness. And somewhere in the night, rain began to fall on Los Angeles, gentle this time, nourishing instead of punishing, washing the city clean and filling it with the promise of things growing, healing beginning again. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is trust a stranger. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help. And sometimes, the most transformative thing we can do is believe that both the giving and receiving of grace can save us in equal measure.
Wow, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this video, the biggest way you can show me love and encourage me to keep creating is to hit that like button and subscribe. Takes 1 second, but it makes a huge difference. Speaking of more videos, I've got another exciting one lined up for you. Just click on the next video showing right on your screen now to keep the fun going. See you there.